All right, welcome back to the show. Incredible is that word again, but this is actual. It actually was an incredible piece in the Athletic. And why the Warriors are in danger of losing Bob Myers. You NBA fans know Bob Myers, former agent, but is the general manager of the Warriors. And a general manager who has done some pretty fantastic stuff. His time in the Bay Area has presided over the current dynasty. The dynasty's not over. It's a dynasty, the Warriors dynasty. He's brought in some key players. He has the respect of those key players. But Bob Myers might be out the door, and Anthony Slater is one of the writers who put this piece together. And Anthony, I'm wondering why. Okay, let's just start right there. Welcome to the show. And why is Bob Myers going to be out potentially?
I think it's a multitude of reasons, which we kind of had to lay out in deeper context. But, as most things starts, I think it starts with money. He is not the highest paid GM in the league, even though you could pretty easily argue he's been the most successful GM over the last decade. And he, Lacob, Joe Lacob, the owner, contends that he's top three. The other side contends he's not top three. I think there's some incentives and base salary disputing within that. So that's kind of at the heart, pay me like I am Bob Myers in a sense, but also direction of the franchise. I mean, I think anyone that follows the Warriors on even a semi-regular basis can see this two timeline clash that's going on, and ownership kind of having this vision to pivot off the dynasty era to the next era. And I think Bob deciding, do I want to be a part of that? Am I the one that maybe is going to have to axe some very popular heads in the next year or two? And also he's just, I think at the point where he's also thinking about what's next for him. He's super successful. He's, super well liked, not even just in the NBA community, but, Silicon Valley, all that. So I think that's all coming to a head.
I thought it was a fabulous piece that you guys did as a someone who was born in San Francisco, someone who was a lifelong Warriors fan, someone who attended games as a kid, and actually someone who was there last night at the game. And to be around people and talk about them. I thought it was a tremendous job you guys did in terms of pulling back the curtain on some of the stuff that's going on. I'll ask you this. The dichotomy in terms of what the Warriors are trying to accomplish in terms of winning a championship with this core group and at the same time developing these young players, where does that come from? Why has it been so difficult to choose one path or the other?
Well, the guy that pulls the most powerful lever in the organization, Joe Lacob, does, and he's stated this publicly. He's been pretty transparent about this. He does not want an extended rebuilding period. He has referenced the Lakers from basically post Kobe era. They had like 6 straight years out of the playoffs. He's like, I'm not doing that. I don't want to do that. He has built this sparkling arena, Chase Center, which sounds like you were in last night, which is a very nice arena. He wants at least relevant teams within that. So he's trying to plan for the post Steph Curry era. But Steph Curry doesn't want to plan for the post Steph Curry era, and has proven last season that they can still win a title. They did win a title. You could see them contending for a title this season, but they've added even more youth onto the roster this season. They bought a second round pick. They took a guy 28th overall, mostly just project type players. And in a lot of ways, that's weighing down the current roster. And that's where I think just like this tug of war is coming to a head in a lot of ways.
Is the tug of war primarily between Myers and Lacob, or are there other parties that are involved in that?
Yeah, I think there's a lot of parties. The one thing about the Warriors is there's a lot of powerful people within the Warriors. The players hold a lot of power within the Warriors. And I'm talking Steph, but I'm Draymond Green, a powerful personality. Andre Iguodala, he's played 3 games this season, but he carries, weight in the organization. Steve Kerr, outspoken coach. Myers, and a large front office, which includes 2 of Joe Lacob's sons. And then Joe, who's very out there as an owner. You'd almost compare him, Jerry Jones, Mark Cuban, like that level of just like, front facing. And there's just motives everywhere. And I think, like Bob has made some of these draft picks. And I think Bob has somewhat agreed, hey, if we're using these draft picks, like we need to go swinging high upside, like, number 2 overall pick, go for a, high level talent instead of just like a 22-year-old that can help. Now, Kuminga actually looks like a very good pick. I'm sure you saw him last night looking pretty good. So, but I think the big thing is when they really put this plan into place was a few years ago. They had just gone 15-50. They were the worst team in the league,
right.
Got Wiseman. And even the next season, they didn't make the playoffs. They were playing. There was a lot of doubt that they could ever get back here. And so they put the plan in place, like, look, this era might be kind of dying, so let's get all these picks for the next era. And then Steph, Draymond, Clay proved, no, we can still win now. And that's where it's been like, it's kind of hard to pivot off something that, you know, like they honestly didn't believe they were going to win the title.
Agreed.
You know,
Agreed.
Hey, Jim, I'm looking at, we had a text chain going last night, and I'm looking at, and it was a passage from the piece, and I told Gary and Natalie, Anthony, I said, this is one of my favorite passages. I said, one has to wonder how the face of the franchise, talking about Steph Curry, would respond to losing the face of the front office, whose signature moves for Andre Iguodala, Kevin Durant, and Andrew Wiggins were pivotal to winning rings. And I just like the way that was really, you really set it up nicely there. Like, okay, there's this parallel thing here, this tension going back and forth between this camp and that camp, all under the Warriors umbrella. And what really blew my mind, though, was seeing that Joe Lacob studies the draft, weighs in on personnel decisions. I just don't like this. I think there's an art to it. And I understand you spend a lot of money on a franchise. And you're like, well, it's mine. So don't tell me I can't do this. But that model doesn't tend to work. What I'm getting at is this. I'm not trying to mess up your access and your media privileges here, Anthony. Is Joe Lacob, is he doing too much as an owner?
Well, I'd say this about Joe Lacob. He came in, he bought the team. So he buys the team from, you know, Cohan, who is, as I'm sure Jim knows, like, was a horrible owner. I mean, like, had run the Warriors into the ground. And he gets there and he makes a very controversial trade at the time, trading Monte Ellis to Milwaukee to get Andrew Bogut. And he was booed relentlessly in Oracle Arena, like his first real public appearance. And he was adamant then that, like, look, I'm coming to change the culture, and we're going to be a sparkling brand franchise. We're going to build this grand palace, and we're going to win a bunch of titles. And that seemed absurd at the time, and he's been proven correctly. Like, it is so hard to build a building in San Francisco that they did. So he has, in his life, always, you know, like what we're all saying and critiquing him, I think rightly for in a lot of ways, he's always like proved people wrong. And like, look, you said I couldn't, you know, turn the Warriors into a dynasty and build this, you know, palace, and I did. So I think part of him right now, he just has such an ambitious approach of like, no, I will contend forever. And history says no, like, you're gonna have to go through a rebuilding period. You can't just draft the next Steph, Clay, Draymond. They don't exist. They're unique people and figures. Yeah. But he thinks he can.
Well, but I get that part. What I'm saying is, why him? I mean, like, if you got Bob Myers, is he trying to be Bob? I got that he has his vision. Good for him. A lot of business people are like that. You said I can't do it. I did it. Look, I pulled myself up from my own bootstraps, blah, blah, blah. We got it.
Yeah.
What I'm saying is he getting in the way of the general manager? Is that the problematic piece here, that Joe Lacob is trying to be the executive of the year and not the owner of the year?
Yeah, I think that they are like somewhat collaborative in the sense of like, hey, we are using the second overall pick. We're not trading it for future assets to help now. Like, we need to build for the future. Let's go to our big scouting department. They have a very large scouting department, and Bob's involved. And I do think like a lot of the actual draft picks were pretty, consensus, but it's more vision of like, not to move off the young guys, not to move off this next era. He also, like, the guy just loves basketball. He plays it a lot. Like I said, he's in these draft workouts, which is very rare. And it's just, he has his opinions. And I mean, like, Jim, you were talking about some of the NFL owners earlier, like they're their own bosses. They can, if they want to be heavily involved, it's part of why they spent so much money on the team. And it's tough to say, no, you can't be.
As we said, as Michael and I have talked about, Marty Schottenheimer used to say, ownership has its privileges. But here's my thing. If you want to go down that track that you're going to use these draft picks on these young players and whatnot, the only way players develop is by playing. And the reality is, Steve is not playing these young guys, the minutes that are required for them to develop. And that's why I say that this organization, something has to come to a head. And if you're not all pulling in the same direction, you don't have a chance. And look, Michael knows this. I'm the biggest Warrior honk, one of them out there. I mean, maybe behind Natalie. And what I saw last night and what I have seen this season, and it pains me to say it, they're not winning a title this year with the way that this is going. They're not. The chemistry is not right. The roles are not right. And when you have this sort of division about what direction are we going, you got to be all in. You can't dip your toe in the water, and say, basically, we're going to try something out. You got to be all in on what you're doing. And you see the frustration from Steph last night, even, with the ejection. Why? Sure. Because they keep making the same mistakes. In the press conference after the game, what's Steve Kerr say when he's asked about turnovers? Yeah, we bring the guys in at practice, we watch film, we go over it, we talk about it, and then we go out and do it again. And then we go and we watch film and we talk about what not to do and what not, and what? We go out and we do it again. This team just doesn't feel right. And this story, which was, again, phenomenal, I would recommend everyone read it, I think highlights some of why this just doesn't feel like previous years with this club. And maybe you think I'm wrong, but that's just what I feel.
No, I agree. Look, they're 24-24. 48 games is a large sample in the NBA. And it surprised some people. If you go back to the summer, so they just won the title, which gives you, an extra, I guess, level of confidence in your processes and everything. Their belief was like, look, Moses Moody's ready. Jonathan Kuminga's ready. Yeah. Wiseman is good enough to be a backup center. Maybe there'll be some bumps early on, but we'll come back. And, their belief was like, it's a more talented roster. Otto Porter may have helped win a title more than a Kuminga or a Wiseman could have, but the upside is there. And they just, I think, have been surprised by the lack of development. So honestly, when they went 3-7 early in the season and had some really bad losses, that just rocked everything, because suddenly they're 10 games into an 82 game season, which they usually take almost like an 82 game preseason. And suddenly Steph Curry's like, no, we need to win tomorrow night. Which means that two-way player over there that's 24 years old, he needs to play over the 20-year-old that you picked second overall. And that's where it just to me, that's where it started kind of going haywire.
Well, what struck me real quick about last night? Think about this. Steph Curry used the word desperate, that they were desperate for a win last night.
Yeah.
I mean, we haven't even got to the All-Star break. And he's saying desperate, not because they're playing Memphis, which obviously is an up-and-coming team and a threat in the West, but because they can't get their stuff right. Yeah. So when I heard that, and you hear Clay say the same thing, it's a big game because we got to get right. I'm like, man, this is not good.
Well, I'll tell you, if that's not good. Go ahead, Anthony. Yeah, go ahead.
I was just going to say, if you talk to people, the major figures, about bigger picture views of this, it's it was dynasties always end, number one, and dynasties always end ugly. The Bulls one did, the Lakers one did, Shaq, Kobe. Breaking up is hard, right? And there was always going to be an end. And honestly, it is extended longer than most people predicted, including themselves in some ways. Maybe not Steph, Clay, and Draymond, but and you're just, I think you're seeing the the early writing, the early story of how it kind of started to dissipate. And part of that is just, it's obvious, clashing of motives. It's just do we care about we're all in on this season, or do 4 seasons from now matter? Well, that just depends on who you ask in the organization. And whereas 4 years ago, everyone was all in on the now, because they were all in their prime and they were all winning and Durant was around. This was bound to happen, is what a lot of people will say.
Well, Anthony, thanks for I know Jim, but thanks for coming on the show. We appreciate you. Great work on this with the Athletic. That's one.
Absolutely.
2, that ejection last night was BS. He shouldn't have been ejected. Context matters, officials.
No, not true. Not true.
He shouldn't have been ejected. And
yes,
3, I'll tell you what is true. I'll tell you what's true, Jim and Anthony. If the Warriors played a round robin with Memphis and Boston, they would win the title. They're a different team against those teams. They play them. They actually make sense against the Grizzlies and Celtics. When they got to have it, they usually get it against them. I don't know. Everybody else on the road, not so much. What do you mean he shouldn't have been ejected, Trotter? What are you talking about?
No, he should have been. He should have been.
Do it at the baseline. Hey, thank you for watching Brother from Another. If you haven't hit that subscribe button, go ahead and do that now. Don't forget you can catch us 3 to 4 weekdays on PeacockTV.com and on Sirius XM Channel 85.